Saudi Arabia's 50-year petrodollar agreement with the U.S. has expired. There is no new agreement in place. Again, no new agreement in place. It seems like, I don't know, they could have saw this coming, Kane. Yeah. It seems like, we knew this was on the way. Saudi Arabia has ditched the dollar. They're not renewing it. It was established before I was born. This thing was established in 1974. So you knew when it was done in 1974, it had a 50-year lifespan. So at some point you knew that you had to re-up this thing, right? This will end the USA as a superpower. That's kind of wild. Because that's not going to be, as a result of this, the US dollar will not be the reserve currency of the world. There is all sorts of stuff that can fall out from this. And I think a lot of people don't understand it because they don't understand they don't understand the concept of the petrodollar. This is a huge shift in power. And it should be, which is insane to me that this is not the top story in the country everywhere. You have Joe Biden at G7 right now. I don't even know if this is going to be something that's discussed. This should be, if the Trump campaign should do a 30-second explainer on this at the next event that he does. And then part of his policy should be talking about how he's going to bring the petrodollar back and reestablish these ties and make the United States, keep the United States an economic superpower. If they were smart, if his advisors are smart, they're going to have him doing that in ways that, like a 30-second explainer, I think he can put it in a way that everybody can understand. And people want to root for the USA. So even if they don't totally understand it, they're going to be on board with it. That's really what needs to be done here. He needs to be focusing on this. Russia's already halted trading in commodities in dollars. We've got almost $35 trillion in debt. And I don't know.
Government's diluted the value of the dollar.
Meanwhile, the ruble's going well. Ruble's strong.
Right. And sanctions were supposed to cripple that.
So we will be, honestly, I don't know how it's not going to be a drag on the U.S. economy. So if you don't understand it, the petrodollar, that's when Saudi Arabia agreed to sell oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. And they got some assistance in return, military security, etc. Now, you might think, well, why are we giving them assistance? I am all for leveraging what I can leverage in order to maintain dominance. That's what I would look at if I was the United States government, and it is the ultimate in national security. It cements you as, if you're an economic powerhouse, you're a powerhouse. And Saudi Arabia not renewing this, I also think that they don't want to renew it because it's Biden. I think if there was a different president in the White House, they would renew it, but they cannot stand Joe Biden. They can't stand Democrats. I mean, Democrats use that whole Jamal Khashoggi thing. Khashoggi was an activist, right? I mean, everyone's like, oh, he was this innocent journalist. He was an activist. I mean, and he was an agitator. He knew, I'm not saying that's justification for everything, but it's like you kind of know what you're getting into when you expose yourself to certain risks and when you do so willingly. But my whole point is that, remember, Biden was like, oh, he was going to break their leaders over there in Saudi Arabia. And then he ended up kissing the ring, like literally. Like, wasn't there a photo of him doing that or something when he arrived in Saudi Arabia for I think it was one of his trips where he went hat in hand to go beg for oil. This is a disastrous move. So we're going to have Carol Roth on, and this is going to be one of the things we're going to have to talk about as it relates to economic policy, because we're going to be diving into some of this stuff coming up. And this is just, it's disastrous. So, and a lot of people, I don't think were really taught about the petrodollar in school. I didn't learn about the petrodollar in school at all or in college. Not at all. Well, basically in econ, but it was like a brief thing. I went to a liberal arts university, so they wanted to extol the virtues. Joke, yeah, I know. the virtues of Marx and Leninism as opposed to, talking about this stuff. So they're going to instead of exclusively in the US dollar, they're going to be selling it in multiple currencies now. So they've ditched the dollar. Now, there was a point that was made. If you look at the difference in the way that, like Saudi Arabia, they cannot stand Biden. Biden's made himself an enemy. And everybody else is suffering. People are trying to say, no. Saudi Arabia, they've never really had an agreement. Yes, they did. Stop it. It was in 1974. Stop it. So when we started moving away from gold. Learn history.